reform. We now are in the process of reforming Judaism. I'm not talking about Reform Judaism. I'm talking about reforming Judaism. That we are shifting from a system in which we relate to the Holy One as King or as Father, to one as partner, that we are partners with the Holy One in this process of creation. And so we join with those Hasidic generations in seeking such an immediate relationship with the divine. The way in which we establish this is by following the basic rules of the universe. The basic rule of the universe is between any 2 points, there's a straight line. Now, this has changed a little bit in the realm of the Kabbalah, when one can say between any 2 points in any of the worlds of experience, that means in the physical, emotional, conceptual, or spiritual worlds, there is a straight line. So, for example, a point in the emotional world will have its physical consequences. That's not hard to understand. Your therapist understands this very well, how a point in your emotional development affects your physical experience in this world, but also your conceptual experience and your spiritual experience, and points between any such lines. And the way in which we've been exploring it in this series is by allowing a story to select us. On the premise is there's a reason why that story selected us. There is a straight line between our desire, our intent, and that story which rises to the surface. The Baal Shem Tov, the blessed master of the 18th century, used to counsel in such a fashion that when a person would come to him and the Baal Shem Tov not have immediate insight into how to advise this person, he would suggest that they stop talking and choose a book, any book, and open to a page, any page, and begin learning. In the process of learning, they would descend from the physical world through the emotion into the conceptual, and their entities, their beings would overlap, and the Baal Shem Tov would have insight into the other person, and when they came back to the surface, would be able then to suggest modes of behavior that might be beneficial. Zalman Schachter Shalomi used to teach this. He was my teacher, and I used to do this in my counseling. When a person would come to me and I'd be lost, I would say, select a book, select a page, and it never failed. We always emerged with insight that we wouldn't have had before. Now, we're doing it differently now by choosing a Hasidic tale. And we begin this by establishing a kavanah, an intent for this learning. That there has to be an intent to begin with. It isn't an entertainment. This isn't instruction. This isn't a matter of what can we do with this story and what can we learn from it. If we have an intent, a question, a desire, a yearning, to experience that as deeply as we can, to articulate it if we can. Very often it can't be articulated. To share it if one likes, and then from that point of view, we would choose a page number and a story short enough to analyze in the time permitted, and see where that story might lead us. The one thing I can assure you is that story never ends. Never ends means that it might have a prequel, it might have a sequel, it might have a parallel expression, but the story is only an encapsulated single experience, and that experience is ongoing. Now, our experience here is Adam and I Adam and I descend into the story as deeply as we can. And my experience is I am a story writer. That's what I do. I'm a fiction writer. And Adam is a teacher. And he will have insights into new teachings, some of which may never have been taught before. And I will have insights into the development of a story, some of the stories never told before. And it can get very exciting. Or the risk, of course, is since we don't know what's going to happen, is it can also go nowhere at all. So if there's somebody who would like to share a kavanah, I think you have the ability to unmute yourself. And now we have physical people here. We have real live people. I think you can see them in the little box, and they extend from left to right. And the basic rule for participation here is you participate as you would on Zoom, as if you were putting something into chat for us to notice, which means you raise your physical hand here, not your virtual hand. And if there's an appropriate break, we take note of it. All of us here are along for the ride, but we need a vehicle to get us started. So we have the High Holy Days coming up. So clearly, for those of us who have responsibility in the High Holy Days, since I stopped being a rabbi some time ago, hey, I get a free ride. But some of us in attendance may be rabbis and may have responsibilities, and we certainly have personal responsibilities as the Holy Days approach, or it may be something else entirely, which is pressing. And if you would like to suggest a kavanah, an intent with which you would approach this, a question, something you would like a response to, and be able to risk it, you can put it into chat or raise your hand, and we'll call on you, and that becomes a starting point. Or we could have several, and let's see how that goes. Thoughts? It's time for you to take a risk. Who is that? Is that Bob Stone? Who's going to risk something?
Thing?
I don't know. If you have anything to suggest, please do, so we can start. If not, my concern is surely with the Holy Days. Diane has something.
Yeah. So I've been participating in quite a few preps for the High Holy Days. And of course, one of the main themes is the Book of Life. Who wrote the Book of Life is one that I listened to the other day. So maybe a little more insight. I think we all have our own ideas about what it means to us, what it is. But again, as a group, to explore perhaps the depth of the Book of Life in the context of approaching the High Holy Days.
It isn't from the group that we explore. It's seeing, what story might speak to us and how to extend that story along that particular line. So we leave it to you to choose a page number, volume 1 from page 35 to 318, volume 2 from page 49 to 318. Would you like a story from volume 1 or from volume 2?
Well, I already have a page number and it's going to be in volume 2. So
how do you already have a page number?
Well, when you were talking about, the process that we've been using in prior sessions, some numbers came to mind.
And was this in association with the kavanah you just expressed?
No, the kavanah came after the page number.
What do we do with that?
I think we see what page number she here, and then we go from there.
We'll see if there's a connection.
Well, there has to be a connection. Okay, what page number and which volume?
We'll make it connect. 278.
Of volume which?
Well, that would be in volume 2.
No, we have These
Yeah,
are
they're split up.
They
So you,
both have
you can
300
pick one or
pages.
two.
Oh, they both have three.
Yeah.
Well, then let's go with volume 1.
Volume 1, page 278.
Oh, you got 77.
278. 278. The title of the story is The Disciple Speaks. Now, as we read the story, I might read it more than once. Your job is to remember it and digest it as best as you can. Now, we have not read this story. Rabbi Asher of Stolin said about his teacher, Rabbi Shlomo, whenever he prays, the rabbi stands with one foot over here and the other over there. And it is the foot over there on which he rests. And everything only in spirit, as it is written, and thy footsteps were not known. I don't understand that sentence. And everything only in spirit, as it is written, and thy footsteps were not known. Once he entered Rabbi Shlomo's room and said to him, Rabbi, your footsteps are not known. And the rabbi retorted, what makes you follow me all the time? And Rabbi Asher responded, come, and I shall tell you when you may and when you may not. Is that right? No, it's the rabbi who was speaking of this. The rabbi responded, says, what makes you follow me all the time? Come, and I shall tell you when you may and when you may not. But the disciple reflected, once he has told me, I shall not be able to transgress. So I'd rather not hear it. Wow, that's a confusing story all in itself. So first we'll look into the story, then we'll look into the Kavanah.
Should we read the story one more time?
I will. The Kavanah, to repeat one more time, is to gain some insight into what is meant of the book of life and to be written into the book of life. We'll keep that in mind. And on the other side, here is the story. The Disciple Speaks is the title of the story. Rabbi Asher of Stolin said about his teacher, Rabbi Shlomo, whenever Rabbi Shlomo prays, I'm adding the names here to try to keep it clear, he stands with one foot over here and the other over there. It is the foot over there on which he rests. And everything is done only in the spirit. And then there's a proof text. And thy footsteps were not known is the proof steps, is a proof text. I don't know where that text is from. Once the disciple entered Rabbi Shlomo's room and said to him, Rabbi, your footsteps are not known. And Rabbi Shlomo says to the disciple, what makes you follow me all the time? Come, I'll teach you when you may and when you may not. The disciple reflects, once he has told me, I shall not be able to transgress. So I'd rather not hear it. You can interrupt with a teaching whenever you like.
It's a pretty It's a pretty amazing story considering you were asking about the Book of Life and like what that's all about. Because like, is that not the purpose of all of this? Is to like actually not know? And like in this story, he's saying, I don't actually want to know because then I know what I'm transgressing. And like, if I know the thing, then it's a problem. And like, that's actually how the story ends. It's like, I'd rather not know. Don't tell me what's right and what's wrong. Let me try and discern it from watching you and from following your footsteps. And like, whether I'm doing it right or not, I don't actually really want to know because I'll try and emulate whatever it is that you're, right? Because it's actually about his kavanah and everything only in spirit, right? So that's like he's witnessing, and what he's learning from his teacher is actually about how his teacher is in the world, not actually about the practical, like the tachlis, the like details of how he operates, but it's actually about, I want to learn from how you live. And that's not necessarily what you're doing all the time, but it's how you walk and be in the world. So the thought of a book of life and what it means to embark on this time and to like be at the eve of Rosh Hashanah, where we think about all of this stuff, like actually there's beauty in not knowing, and there's beauty in this struggle. And like part of what I mean, that's what's hitting me. I don't know. Part of this is like surrendering to how these stories flow through all of us and like thinking about, but I would never have read this and thought about the book of life. And your framing of like, oh, the book of life, and then it's like, yeah, of course, this is totally what this story is about.
When the key words in the opening paragraph are 1 foot over here and the other foot over there. So 1 foot is in this world when he's praying, and his other foot is in the adjacent world. Recall how Olam Hazeh, how Olam Haba mean adjacent in the sense of proximal, that one is proximal to the other. They both exist at the same time. So in the process of prayer, there is a point where 1 foot is in this world, and then as one goes through the discipline of prayer, one steps forward and puts a foot into the other world and stands behind the last rank of angels to sing Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. And so one is rocking between worlds, if you like. You can think of what is a person doing who is shuttling like this, moving back and forth like this. That person begins in this world and moves to the other world as much as one can tolerate it, then comes back and then samples the next world as much as one can tolerate it. And now your footsteps are not known. I'd like to know what it is that you're experiencing there. And the rabbi says, come, I will tell you when you may follow in my steps and when you may not. And he realizes that he doesn't want to necessarily follow in the footsteps of the master. If he does that, his own process is stopped. It says, I may not be able to transgress. Now, transgress is an avera, avor in Hebrew. Transgress does not necessarily mean to commit a sin. Transgress means to move off of a path, literally transgress, move off a path. And if one is locked into the straight and narrow, then the process that one might gain from moving off to the left and moving off to the right and sharpening facets of the soul that one might not have experienced for otherwise won't happen. So he doesn't want to be locked in like that, he realizes. There's only so much that he wants to learn. Yes.
Sorry, can I say something?
Sure.
There's a beautiful phrase in the Hasidic thought. It says, Adam nikra mehalech, that a human being is called one who wanders, who goes, who journeys. And like part of, I think the essence of our peoplehood is to like actually be in both of those spaces, to have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and to like figure out that there is the way in which we each actually walk those lines, and that way we experience this world, and then also whatever spiritually we're able to tap into and experience. But it's straddling, right? It's the two Shabbat. It's the idea of like that there's this world and another world, and like we're always ebbing and flowing between the two experiences, and that there are times when we have spiritual connections and times when we're dealing with laundry and washing the dishes, and like part of it is finding the wholeness in all of that. But it's actually for each of us to figure that path. It's not so he's saying, I don't want to know your path. I want to learn from the path that you're on, but don't tell me your path.
I was blessed to have great imperfect teachers. Has v'shalom, I should follow in their path, at least parts of their paths. One was Shlomo Kalbach, blessed memory. The other was Zalman Schachter Shalomi, blessed memory. I learned reams of learning from them, and had arguments with both of them. I was very fortunate. So a story comes to mind that's never been told before. Let's see where it goes. And there was a fellow who had questions concerning the Book of Life as the holy days were approaching. Now, the Book of Life is opened on Rosh Hashanah, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed. And during the month of Elul, in preparation for this, he learned every text there was about the Book of Life, and then desired that he should not only be written into the Book of Life, but he should have the opportunity to see it. So on Rosh Hashanah, he prayed that the Rosh Hashanah Yekatevun, on Rosh Hashanah it is written. I want to see how it is written. I actually want to see this. I'm not satisfied that there is a book. I want the experience of the book and the experience of seeing it. So he began to descend one step into meditation, and and when he got far enough, there was a warning, and the warning says, "Are you sure that you want to see?" And he said, "Maybe I'm not so sure." And so he stepped back. But on the next day, he was sure again. And he said, I am more sure than ever. I really want to see. And so he meditated very, very deeply. And again, he came to a barrier and he says, "Are you sure you want to proceed beyond this gate?" And he says, well, maybe not. And so he stepped back. And so it went each day. He went a little bit deeper. And each time he came up against a barrier. And at the barrier, he got this warning, are you sure? And then he would step back. But as Yom Kippur came closer and closer, he decided that truly he wanted to see. And so it was. He stayed up the entire night after Kol Nidre, and on Rosh Hashanah morning, he began his descent at Netz HaChama at the break of dawn, and he went down deeper and deeper and deeper, and he saw there was a desk, and on the desk there was a book, and the book was closed. And besides the book, there was a pen. And he walked up closer, knowing that this was the Book of Life. And he looked around for permission to open it. And there was none to give him permission. He says, is it all right? He asked, and he had a sense, you've come this far. It's up to you. Do you want to open it and see what's in it or not? And he decided he would open it. And he opened to the first page, and the first page was empty. There was nothing on it. And he opened to the second page, and he expected to see lists and lists of names, but each page was empty. And then he went through all of the pages, and he saw they're all empty. And he said, there is no writing in this book of life. And he said, well, are you living? And he said, of course I'm living. He says, do you think dead people write in the book of life? Only living people can write in the book of life. And he saw the pen, and the pen was now in his hand. And he said, I'm not going to, who am I to write my own name into the book of life? That would be great chutzpah. And he said, well, why would you write your own name? Here is the first page. Write the name of your beloved. Write that person's name into the book of life. And so he wrote his wife's name into the book of life. And the page turned. And he said, you have children. Write each name into the book of life. You have daughters-in-law, sons-in-law, write their names into the book of life. You have grandchildren, write their names into the book of life. You have business partners, write their names into the book of life. And go through each of the pages and write on each page a name of somebody precious to you into the book of life. And he realized that, he didn't exist at all. All he was somebody in relationship to each of these people. And he said, well, am I done now? He said, no, you've only begun. He said, now go back to the beginning. Because you don't know whether next Rosh Hashanah you are going to be here or not. You don't know. And what you do now is to each of these people write words that begin with this sentence. To my darling wife, I don't know if I will be here next Rosh Hashanah. If I am not, please open this book and read this page. And then to each of your children, write, I don't know if I will be here next Rosh Hashanah. If I am not, this is what I want you to remember of me. And to your children-in-law, and to your grandchildren, and to your business partners, and to each person who has helped define you in all of your years in living. Spend this Rosh Hashanah writing. And so he wrote in this book of life these messages to everyone who was precious to him, and then closed the book of life. So the intent is to see how a story emanates from a story. Diane, have we met some of your Kavanah? I'm happy we were able to do that. Each of us is talented differently. But the story is intended to evoke a process within you. And if all it is providing information for you to file away, and you say, well, that reminds me, there's a story like this in Greek literature, I'll write a paper on it. That's useful to get a degree, but if you don't do something with that degree, the degree is no more than a piece of paper. A story is much more than a story. A story is a vessel, it's a vehicle, it carries you somewhere. So it carries you into the places that you've never been before. And so that's an example of a never-ending story.
It's a good one.
That was okay. Let us,
Wait, before we move on, Danny, you wanted to,
yes,
we
no,
have passed the, sorry.
you pass.
Yeah, something also about the previous story. Yeah, honestly, there are lots of like interesting things to think about, but I think the thing that was the most opposite to what I expected was when the disciple says that like once you once you show me whatever the exact wording was, I won't be able to transgress. But I think it's a classic rabbinic teaching that sometimes you don't want people to know everything, because if they know something, then they'll be transgressing willingly, and if they don't know something, then they won't be transgressing willingly, and it won't be as severe of a punishment. So just like that concept of if I know, I won't be able to transgress. Like I was expecting completely the opposite, and it was a fascinating thought. I guess, like I said, the classical rabbinic teaching is kind of like that assumption that people are mostly unchanging, that they are who they are, they're going to do the things that they do, and we as a community want to support them and make sure that nothing too harsh comes about because of the things they do.
Okay. In I used to be a rabbi robed in a major Reform congregation and would give powerful sermons. And the robe enhances one's power, like so. And they're very powerful and directive.
I wish I had a robe.
Yeah, I don't have them anymore. I even got rid of my Navy uniforms. But you would look good in a robe.
I think I would also look good.
I realized that I wasn't doing the congregation a service. I was conducting a service, but I wasn't doing a service. That the more powerful I spoke, the more I put the stopper on their own creativity. And after 5 years of doing that, I stepped aside. And I left that expression of the rabbinate. And I determined that I would follow this model. That this Rabbi Shlomo, had the power to speak that powerfully, that his disciples would follow him in such a way as to put limits on their growth, rather than empower them to transgress and risk going off one path into another. One of the great elements of this community was after the Baal Shem Tov, his main teacher was Dov Ber, the Maggid of Mezrich. And Dov Ber had a table of 10, 12, I forget how many, great students. And this book is an example of these students, each of them so utterly different from the other, following the philosophy of partnership with the Creator. This is clearly what Reb Shlomo's intent was his disciples should be in their own partnership with their Creator, and not follow in rote footstep with me, but risk transgression, risk going off the path and finding a way to develop and refine your own soul. So it was a very different model. And then as I became a teacher, that was my model. And I wasn't the only one doing it. We had the Chavurah of South Florida and the National Chavurah community that goes on to this day, which are egalitarian communities, where the basic rule of the teacher is to empower your students, not enable them. Not to impress them with your knowledge, but to create a system so they can develop their own. And that's why I say, whereas my talent is a storyteller, each of you have your own talent. And the question then is, how do you take a story like this, as profound, as difficult as this story was, and begin to make it malleable in such a way that you find a way to express it, on the wall in art and music and poetry and such. Do we have another kavana? Is anybody willing to risk another? It's good to have an intent before a page number is chosen, but clearly having the page number and then finding the intent worked as well. Oh, everybody's so quiet. What do you have?
I think Rosh Hashanah, I think like being inscribed in the Book of Life is like such a personal thing. Like that's like me, that's mine. I'll say interesting with the story, how it's kind of the opposite, how it's really you're defined by your interpersonal relationships. I guess like entering that in terms of my mind, it's very personal thing. Am I worthy to go on for another year? Am I worthy to be inscribed? And then a lot of times in life, like they're the opposite. Like I guess we feel like so many things are completely out of our control. We feel like we're such a small piece of the puzzle.
The question is quite clear. Am I worthy? That's it. That's everything you just said, comes down to those three words. Am I worthy?
That wasn't what I was thinking.
No, I'm sorry, but those were the words you said.
Yeah, I guess maybe it was. Maybe it's what I didn't know I was thinking.
Let's see how are you worthy or not. You willing to find out?
Yeah, sure.
Well, volume 1 or volume 2?
Volume 2, page 147.
That's 147.
Is that a good nutshell?
It wasn't a nutshell. I wasn't a nutshell I was going to, but maybe it was a nutshell I should have been going. That I was ordained to go to.
What's the legacy?
No, that wasn't my initial thought either.
Let's see. 147 has a bunch of stories. Oh my goodness.
Oh, you're on 2. We were on 2?
Yeah, volume 2, yes.
Okay, how many stories are there on the page? Should I pick one story?
You said volume 2 or volume 1?
I said volume 2.
Yeah, so page 147. My eyes fall to a very short story. The question is, am I worthy? That's the kavanah. At least that's what I heard. Maybe I lifted it from you to me.
Yeah.
I want to know if I am worthy. And the story is each his own. You want to read it?
Sure. It's very short. You ready? Rabbi Uri said, David could compose the Psalms, and what can I do? I can recite the Psalms.
That's gorgeous.
Say it once more.
Rabbi Uri said, David could compose the Psalms, and what can I do? He says, I can recite the Psalms.
One can argue the recitation is actually more important than the writing. If you think about Shakespeare, the writing is great.
Remember, I've got to be able. The recitation is more important than the writing.
Reiterating for virtual folk.
Yeah, because we're reporting to the whole people on Zoom. David could compose the Psalms. Hell, am I worthy? I can't compose any Psalms. Adam just came up with a teaching. Mitch just came up with a story. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a storyteller. Am I worthy? So what can I do? The answer is I can recite the Psalms, and that makes him worthy. Oh, wow. what it is this. You don't have to deliver a great teaching. You don't have to write a book of stories. On the other hand, you do have to do what it is that you're capable of doing. So there are many classic stories, very short stories and very long ones. The classic short story is of Reb Zusha, who was asked the tradition is that when he was leaving the world, he was asked by his disciples, Reb Zusha, why are you trembling? And he says, because I'm going to have to stand before my divine partner, the general partner of the universe. I'm changing the language a little bit. And they said, but Reb Zusha, you were like Moses in your lifetime. And he says, when I stand before the Holy One, I'm not going to be asked, why was I not more like Moses? I'll be asked, why was I not more like Zusha? That's a famous story. It's a very short one. And they're also a very long one. David could compose the Psalms, and what can I do? I can recite the Psalms. Oh my goodness, it's the curse of blessings. Okay, the but it's not fair to tell stories that I've already told. On the other hand, okay, doing 100% of what you're able to do. There was a royal archer, and he could set up a target 100 yards away and pull back on the arrow and let the arrow float through the air, and it would strike the bullseye, but maybe a fraction of an inch off to one side or the other, because there was always wind, and the wind would take the arrow slightly off track and move it, so it was less than perfect. And he practiced his art over and over and over, and this actually is perfect. And he decided, I need to go off and meditate and find a teacher who can teach me so that I can achieve perfection. And so he went on a walkabout. And as he went on his walkabout, he saw there was a barn. And on the barn, there were a dozen targets. And in each target, there was an arrow. And the arrow was precisely in the center of each target, not a fraction of an inch off. And he said, this is the greatest archer that ever was. I have to go find him. So he went into the town to inquire of this archer. And as they inquired, people laughed at him and said, why are you laughing? And he says, you're not looking for a great archer, you're looking for a fool. And he said, why a fool? And he says, because he shoots his arrows first and paints his targets afterwards. That's not an original story with me. That's the story of Simcha Bunim, pretty much told the way he did it. He was a Hasidic master. I've also encountered that story in Hindu tradition. It's also told as a story in the business world as somebody who repaints his failures as success, and such. But I realized early on that stories never end. And I was never satisfied with that story. And so I thought, where does that story go? He says, so you have the royal archer, and how does the royal archer feel? So you take the royal archer to a different level, to the realm of feelings. And he's angry. He's angry that this fool, this painter of targets, could ridicule his spiritual discipline. And he says, I'm going to find that painter. And so he finds out who the painter is, and he goes and he knocks on the door of that painter. And the painter hears the knock, and he goes up and he opens the door and he looks up, and there's the royal archer. And the royal archer is about to clobber him. And the painter says, it's you. You're the royal archer. You're my hero. You're the greatest archer in the world. I've always wanted to be able to do what you do. And of course, now the archer can't clobber him. And he says, so why is it that you do what you do? And why do you shoot, 12 arrows at a barn and then paint 12 targets? And the painter says, I don't shoot 12 arrows at a barn. I shoot 100 arrows at a barn. I'm lucky if 12 hit the barn. And then I'm so excited that 12 hit the barn. I'm a painter. I go and I paint as beautiful targets as I can possibly paint. I can't compose the Psalms, but I can recite the Psalms, the story says. Well, that's not the ending of the story. So I sleep on that, and I say, wait, that story goes on. So the archer spends the night with the painter. And they get up early the next morning, and the archer takes his bow, and the painter takes his paints. And they go off in search of a barn. And they find a barn. And on the barn, there's a small mark, which becomes the target for the archer. And the archer stands back 100 yards, and like so, and releases the arrow. But the wind catches the arrow, and the arrow falls an inch or two off center. The painter says to the archer, now it's my turn. Come, and I'll show you how to paint a perfect target. And so they learn from each other's discipline. The archer becomes a better archer and the painter becomes a better painter and an archer. And that's how that story continues. But it's no different than this one-line story. It says each person has a certain talent. To recite Psalms, to be able to do the Psalms for the morning service in such a way that you're doing more than mumbling them, that you do them with power and fill people with the beauty of David's poetry, and with the rhyme of reason that David creates between the A part and the B part of the verses. There's a real talent. David perhaps could not recite his own Psalms, but this person could. We have a few minutes left. Between any 2 points in the universe, there's a straight line. Should we try another? See if we can squeeze one more in. David, do you have something? I was just curious. I just saw your arms moved. Do you have teaching to add? Well then, I'm going to open the book at random and see what it is I need for this moment. Rabbi Shlomo asked his disciple, Rabbi Asher, I turned back to the page we had already been to, but a different story. At just the right time for the end, when did you come to prayer? Rabbi Shlomo asked his disciple, Rabbi Asher, when did you come to prayer? That's a strange question. At just the right time for the inn named Exult, O ye righteous, was his reply. Well done, said the tzaddik. If you drive, and if you stop, you look around to see if anything is wrong. For if you stop midway, it is easy to fall behind. Boy. I wish I understood it. But the first line is, when did you come to prayer? It doesn't say, when did you come to pray? It's, when did you come for the discipline of prayer? When did prayer begin to have some intensity for you? When did you first step into the discipline of prayer so that it began to carry you? I don't pretend to understand the inn named Exalt, O you righteous, but the well done, if you drive, and if you stop, you look around to see if anything is wrong. For you stop midway, it is easy to fall behind. Prayer is a discipline that begins with the early morning blessings, goes right through the Psalms into the Shema, to standing behind the last rank of angels for the Kedusha. And there's a point at which people recognize that the purpose of prayer isn't to be meaningful, and it isn't to be relevant, that prayer is a vehicle that carries you places. And it can be done by putting nigunim, tunes, to the words, and becomes powerful and moves you. But if you are being moved in a steady progress like that, and if you interrupt a journey, the Talmud says there's a certain place where you're not permitted to interrupt. You just continue. You go.
I was just going to say it's the reciting of the Psalms. And then it goes back to our first story of the Book of Life, which is like it's actually about impacting all the others, and like how the ripple effect of our place in this world and how it interacts with others. So this story and that story, they're actually all very beautifully connected.
Well,
Those three.
it's been a journey tonight.
We got somewhere. We went somewhere.
We went somewhere, and it's a risk each time we do something like this. This isn't imparting information. This is trying to convey a process that each of us can adapt as best as we're able. The goal in sessions like this, and all the sessions that we've done 50 words of Torah, 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, 18 sessions on prayer, and now the never-ending story. But in every single session, the goal was growth, incremental spiritual growth. that each of us leaves incrementally better for the experience. Not necessarily knowing anymore. Knowledge, your cell phone knows much more than nobody teaches to impart information anymore. I don't know that.
Nobody should.
Hmm?
Nobody should.
Nobody should. Information is readily available. Transformation is the goal of future learning. So thank you for taking these risks with me. We're going to stop the recording, but you can unmute yourselves and talk with each other if you like. I don't think we've done a very good job of getting the word out that we've resumed these sessions. We're going to have to find a way of